that affects people and try and cover some of the questions that people have had specifically to it. Essentially, it's just going to be a short presentation where I go over people's questions, and then we'll just open the floor. And essentially, if you've got a question, raise your hand, and we'll come to you in time order. If you've got a question on anything that we cover initially, so any of the questions that I'm answering, because these are all questions that were submitted via the form. If you've got anything to add to any of those, by all means raise your hand, and we'll attempt to come to you and have a bit of a chat. We're going to try and keep a tight meeting as best as we can. So without any further ado, we're just going to jump straight into them. I'm just gonna, it's nothing personal, Jeff. I'm just going to put your mic on mute. There's a bit of feedback. That's maybe too much power, but there we go. Probably the only time I'll ever get a chance to do it, but there we are. So I think jumping literally straight into it, the biggest question I think we've got, and the question that I think was most, the question that was put to us most was why? Why is it that we've come out after this offer was presented to us, and why have we as a union, or why is Unison called to accept it, basically? And I think ultimately a lot of what it boils down to is sort of procedure, essentially. It was kind of done on the premise of, to ensure that we all leave the room that we're bartering in, to bring it out to members. It kind of would go against the grain to not. We have to try and be seen to be promoting this deal as a good one, because it is genuinely what Sarah believed was the best offer we were going to get, which is why the initial sort of response was to promote it. And in doing so, it kind of gave it a little bit more weight as well. It allowed us to kind of, again, if we said that whatever offer was put to us, we would then recommend to members, it meant the government might be more willing to give us a little bit extra. But ultimately, everybody was given the choice. We didn't force anybody to vote one way or the other. It was really key for a lot of this that it was seen to be a democratic process that we had, that we put out to members. So the main reason is that it's just part of the bargaining process to say that we accept it. If this is genuinely what Sarah Gorton believed, and she's come and spoken to us sort of personally as a group of ambulance services, excuse me, while at conference, and she does come across as very genuine, very down to earth. This isn't Unison towing the government's line. This is Unison saying genuinely this was the concern. I think a lot of what was presented was the concern that numbers at picket lines were maybe not where they were initially, and that they were very aware that keeping this going regularly it was always going to be a challenge for us, and the worse the turnout gets, the weaker your position. So they kind of had to make a decision at some point to take what we've got and recommend it. It's probably a good point at this point to say that we sort of appreciate that there are people that are, were annoyed by this stance. It's the elephant in the room. You can't not address it. I think ultimately we had to make, you can't go into a bartering process, taking what Sarah said, you can't go into a bartering process and then not accept the result when you come out the other end. It goes with the territory. And, I think at no point, we understand that, and I think everybody understands that we should, in a perfect world, that offer would be more. But like in any bargaining process, you often don't get everything that you ask for, and there has to be some form of meet in the middle. And this is where we feel like or certainly where the team that were there on our behalf feel like they were able to get to, if that makes sense. So this isn't, I think it's also probably important to comment at this point to say that this isn't the end either. I think we're aware now that we're able to mobilise our workforce, we're able to get behind this. There is still another year of pay negotiations coming up. So I think it was to be aware that this puts us on a certain footing that maybe it wasn't as far as we want to be, but it gives us scope to renegotiate next year, to relook at things in the future. And that was certainly something that was mentioned today at conference. So if anybody has any questions, like I say, just pop your hand up. I'll come to you sort of individually. We'll just move on to other things. Yes, Tom, go for it.
Hiya, Tom. Yeah, first things first. I just wanted to say well done on the way that you've put that across. Credit where credit's due. You've explained that very well, even to myself as a rep. Also, so the question that I keep getting asked amongst my colleagues is, in light of the fact that the RCN have rejected the pay offer and we have accepted, is there the possibility, if the other ambulance sector unions do also reject, that we could end up on different pay scales, or the potential for continuation of industrial action if the collective sort of health sector unions reject? So what are the possibilities, basically, if the other unions reject and we sort of seem to be the minority that have accepted this pay offer?
Well, Tom, it was almost as if I'd planted you in the crowd to ask that very question, because the next question that we have on the list. So we're going to go through these that were all presented to us in the form. So we'll come to that one. So if we pop a pin in it, because I can see other people have raised their hand before we move on, but it is the next question on the list to go to. So just bear with us and we'll come to that one. So there was a few hands went up all at once. So let's just have a look and work out who was first. So Darren, I've got your hand up first for that.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, just off what you're saying there about Sarah Garden, saying it's the best she could get based on, she was predicting that the picket lines and the support was going to deteriorate. I have to disagree with her there, simply because at the point when they've gone into negotiations, we've got action short of strike planned, which we'd not had in place before, and it was coordinated. And for the want of a better phrase, this government was, and that's what's forced them into the room. So we did have a strong hand. There's 13 trusts, as I understand it, who had a mandate for industrial action, of which 9 of them were ambulance trusts. So the ambulance sector had a very, very strong hand, and it had this government by the balls. And Sarah Gordon and her colleagues in that room failed to shake them. And I don't think she can't bat that down or try and dismiss the strong hand what we had. And I think she's played a fiddle in there, and she's played a fiddle on behalf of the government when she should have been doing the opposite. She should have been chucking the bombs in.
Yeah, no, cheers for that. To be really honest with you, I think you raise a very, very valid point, and I think it's one of these things that you could sort of sit and argue until the cows come home, I think. And I think there is very much an appreciation from the executive team that were in the room having these discussions, that whenever you get to this sort of position where you have to accept or reject, or you come to a final deal, it's always going to be a bit of a roll of the dice. There's never any definites in these sorts of processes. And I think based on what you've said, I think you're very right. I think we were about to increase our industrial action, which I think has brought the government to the table. And I think nobody's disputing that. I think that is there and is clear to see. I think certainly the argument that's been made here, and I think it's probably worth putting on the record here that I am just speaking based on what's been told to us today and what we've looked at and the response we've had from people. We've liaised with the press team and other people to try and get as many answers as possible. We don't have all of them. And this is by no means coming directly from me, but I think what was said ultimately is it's always a roll of the dice. And, you could have pushed for more and ended up in a position where Steve Bartley walked out. From what I understand, it was a very difficult negotiation in that Sarah said it was very unconventional, this adult discussion of, okay, well, we want this, you want this is what money's on offer. It wasn't what we see as a normal, because this isn't a normal government that we're arguing with. This was somebody who, he said 1%, he said a certain percentage, Sarah said a different percentage, and essentially it became, you know, a bit of a swinging contest for who could argue the most, and it wasn't as much of a productive sort of meeting as probably they would have liked. So that's not to kind of excuse what we've been left with, but I think there had to be a realization that the government may have walked away from these strikes, and I think the concern from Unison was, do we have another 3 months in us? You know, with the end of certain mandates were coming up. Do we have another? Did we as a branch? Did we as a union have it in us to go again, to ask another question, or to ask for that mandate again? Would we necessarily get that? And I think this is why I mean. It's almost a bit of a game. It's a bit of a roll of the dice, because we could have come out of there and gone back to strike industrial action, but ultimately, if we lose our mandate and we don't get those people back, because it was a struggle, we all know it was a struggle. That was the worry, is that we didn't do that. So it's a fine line they've had to walk. Nobody's arguing it was perfect that they've got. I think it's now just a case of making what we've got work. I know that Sam and Jeff, I think you guys put your hand up. Was it in direct response to this? Do you want to come in on this, or? Yeah, so Jeff, if I want to bring you in.
Yeah, you know, it's Tom, myself, a few others in the room today, and the first thing we said when we come out is we wish that there was an opportunity for you, the members, to be in that room and listen to what was being said. I've not been biased. I've known Sarah for many years, and I trust her 100%. That's my personal view. And Sarah stood up in that room today, and don't think for 1 minute she hasn't been challenged. She has. She's been challenged, and you know, every time she stood up and responded, she's had legitimate answers and responses. And I think what it comes down to, and I apologise to this, Daz, because I know we said it was 13. That was my mistake. It's 17 in total. But Sarah said straight out, she said it's been really, really difficult. Sat around the table with 17 other trade unions, some of which are very small. The RCN, well, we're the biggest, RCN are the next biggest. And we was the only trade union, and this is where Sarah's hands were tied, really, where Sarah was arguing for Band 2 staff, Band 3 staff, as well as Band 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. Whereas the other trade unions were predominantly arguing for the higher bands. And this is where the hands were tied. And like I say, I genuinely wish that the likes of yourself, Daz, and others could have been in that room today, because you can see the frustration, you know, on a face. I'll say straight out now, from a trade union perspective, it was said this morning, you know, in the wider group, that had, you know, it gone a different way, you know, we'd have gone with it. It was down to the members here in NWAS. The vote, we've had the figures, 69% have voted yes, and it's either 68, 69 that have voted. You know, that was a return. That is a legit response, and I know there's many other you know, theories and conspiracy theories about, you know, bent votes. I can promise you that hasn't happened. And what I'll finish with, Tom, sorry, I'm not going to go on forever, because I know you're going to cover a lot of the stuff as part of this. Thanks, Sam. What I'll say is, there's thousands of people here, health workers. Unison is a health conference. It's purely down to us and what we all do. And what I'll say is, there was a pay discussion this morning, and I thought it was going to be really, really, really heated and a lot of arguments and etc. etc. But I can honestly say, hand on heart, the number of people who got up and opposed what's happened, 2 or 3, maybe 4, right? And that's it. Out of a room of thousands and thousands of representatives, there were people who raised concerns about the way some things have been done, and things could have been done differently, and it's all been acknowledged. Nothing's been argued against in that respect. But I think that, just to box it off, I think coming back to Sarah, it was quite clear that Unison, being the largest health union, who represents staff from band 1, 2, right the way up to the highest bands, was negotiating for everybody. Now, I think I know this. I look at a certain name on here that's about to come on next to be arguing for having one union, for ambulance staff. And joking aside, we've had these conversations, but that's been tried and failed with the ASU. But I'm going to shut up there, Tom. I'm hoping I've covered some of the things, and I just wanted to. I just want to reassure you in terms of what's happening here. Tom's done a star job. I've got to say, his head's going to get bigger and bigger here, and I'll say he's been absolutely brilliant. He's been up there on the microphone saying the piece, and that's what we're here for at the end of the day. But every single concern that has come through with the questions on the the sheet that has been put out, the questions have been asked and the responses have come back, and that's why this is what we're doing today, to try and give you that reassurance. Whether you like, I accept people might not like it. Some people are happy, some people are not. But I think we've got it. I said I was going to finish, didn't I? And I haven't. But I think the other aspect is the majority in NWAS, the vast majority of our members are in band 2 and 3. They massively outnumber us in the higher bands, and we've encouraged people from a branch position to vote on what's best for them, despite Unison's recommendations. Yeah, they've recommended, which obviously why this question's been answered, and we know people are upset. But from a branch, I've certainly sent loads of messages out saying, look, this is the Unison position, but you need to vote on what you want to do. So anyway, I'm shutting up now, Tom. Thank you for the time.
No, not a problem at all. I can see, Daz, you've just put your hand back up again. Is it a response or is it another question?
No, it is a direct response. I mean, I take the point that Jeff spoke there. He did mention the lower numbers of persons from other branches who are at this conference who are not speaking up against the outcome. I think it's right to point out that a minority of branches got a mandate to take action. Well, that tells me that those who didn't get a mandate are quite happy with what they were due to receive from the pay review body and have been happy in the past. Because if you can't get over the line for a yes vote, then really you've not really got a voice for me at the health conference on this subject. It should just have been those who did have a mandate, whose members were up for a fight, and who did manage to get over the line with a yes vote. And it's disappointing that the majority of persons who are putting an X in the box or whatever it may have been, their branch did not have a mandate for this action. And I know you can't single them out and cut the union into pieces as to who gets a vote and who doesn't, but that again is disappointing, and that needs looking at going forward.
Yeah, just to come back in on that, Daz, we'll try and keep moving. Mark, I am coming to you. I promise. You've been sat there for ages. Ultimately, I mean, look at in the chat the turnout that we had within our branch. Those numbers that Sam posted are even just internally in our branch. I think we've got to be very aware this was a very good, or certainly a much better offer for those on a lower band. The percentages were different, and the money on offer is different in comparison to their end salary. So actually, as much as there were other branches that also voted, I think our turnout and our yes and no split was fairly indicative of the wider vote within Unison. So I think it's been generally widely received that this is what people want, and it is the most democratic way of doing it. But that doesn't negate the fact that there are frustrations, and I think we'll keep up with this going forward. But we'll put a pin in that. Mark, if you want to come in with your comment, apologies, you've been waiting for ages for that.
I know. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
No, and so contrary to what Jeff thinks I was going to say, but I am a great advocate for getting rid of Unison. I don't think they do. I don't think they bring anything to the party. I don't think they're the union for us, because they're too big to be concerned about what the ambulance service wants, because they've got everybody else to please.
Mark, cheers, bud.
Yeah, well, I'm just responding to what Jeff said, if that's okay. But what I'd like to just touch on what you said before, Tom, where you said this round of action, you think that's put us in a stronger position for next year's negotiations. I would actually argue against it. I think from what I've got from talking to people, that Unison has quite frankly betrayed the ambulance service. And I don't know anybody who I've met at all. I've talked to about 30 people who have any confidence in Unison going forward. And so would they vote for strike action again, considering, and I lost money along with everybody else on here when they're going on strike action? I don't think they will. And another thing you said that I picked up on earlier, when you said that Unison were quite neutral when they sent out the paperwork, which way to vote, and that's completely not right, is it? Because at every single turn, every single email they put out, they were ramming the accept this deal vote down our necks. So they didn't take that neutral position, Tom. They took very much of the position, because every single bit of literature that you could see was recommending us to accept this vote. And that is not a neutral stance whatsoever. That is accept this vote. And there'll be a lot of people there who blindly do, because they think the union's got their back, will do what the union tells them to do. Because historically, that's what union people have done. It wasn't a neutral whatsoever. So let's not kid ourselves with that. And I think let's not kid ourselves that this puts us in a stronger position either. But I think it puts us in a weaker one. And that was it.
Perfect. Cheers for that, Mark. So just to respond to them, I think we're going to need to keep things moving. We'll come to you, Adam, and then I think we'll cut questions off there. But essentially, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know the ins and outs of how it would work next year if it came to it. I'm also not going to sit here and defend sort of Unison to the hilt. Ultimately, we're not arguing that Unison took a neutral stance. Unison was quite clearly for this vote. We know that was the case. But it's really key to kind of note that what they didn't do was just give us this. They gave us the vote. That's what I mean when I say it was neutral. They allowed members to, go and do that, be adults, basically, to weigh it up, to have a think about it. They've posted their information that they've posted. Yes, it was biased. It's always going to be biased, but they've allowed people to make their own decision. They haven't just said, here we are as a union and we're going to accept it because this is what we want. They've put it to everybody else. But I appreciate that's frustrating. And I think to go from that point about does it put us in a stronger position, I think going forward, what it shows the government is that we can get our members out. We can get people's arses onto a picket line, and that any day of the week makes the union stronger. I think it also means that you probably won't be privy to this, but we've pulled out of the independent peer review body that isn't so independent. We all know that. We've pulled out of it now, and going forward, the motion was passed today that we aren't going to support that process. So Unison is doing things. Paramedics in Scotland are paid £2,000 more than what paramedics down here are, because they've been out of that peer review body for years. So we're hoping that going forward, we are making steps to make pay better. We're not getting it exactly right, but we're trying. I'll let you respond. I'm just going to bring Sam in because I think he wants some housekeeping done. Go on, fella.
Cheers. Just very quickly, if you've got a question, what might be beneficial, because we have got the best part of 30 questions to get through, and we're nearly halfway through, is either pop your questions in the chat or in the there's the activities icon, which looks like a PlayStation icon. There's an FAQs in there where you can post your questions, and as we go through, we'll try and get your questions answered. It's just that we've had just shy of 30 questions submitted, which we need to try and get through. If that's okay with everybody.
I'll just jump in. I promise you, I've not got 30 slides all with different questions. I think I've managed to summarize it to about 8, but you're right, we have stayed in this. But we knew that this was going to be the big question. It's always going to be the big question. Adam, are you all right to pop your question in the chat while we just finish off sort of and Mark sort of replies? Is that all right? Perfect. Go on, Mark.
Did you say something to me?
Yes, are you all right? Just pop me a question in the chat and we'll come to it just to keep things moving.
Yeah, no problems.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, go on, Mark.
Me?
Yeah, did you have anything further to say? Sorry, your hand was still up.
No. Oh, sorry. No, I pressed the wrong button.
It happens. We've not quite had anybody talking on mute yet. Oh, in fact, no, Erica, I tell a lie. Oh, well, there we go. There's a full Teams or Microsoft Office bingo. There we go. Or Google Suites even. Right, so on to my next question then. So this was a big one. Again, we've already alluded to it. Tom mentioned it. What happens if the other unions vote to reject this offer? Essentially, where that would put us is we all have to kind of, we're all in it together. We all have to meet. So there's the 2nd of May, and that's a really key date. And I'm probably going to repeat it again. The 2nd of May is Staff Council. That's when all of the unions get together again to discuss things going forward. That's when we'll know what the stance is for everybody to go back into those negotiations and how that's going to work. I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot tell you how that's going to go. And even when the question was put directly to people like Sarah, and when we've been in a room with Christina and asked the question, nobody has a firm response because we've just never been here before. So what I can tell you is that is a definite date. So nothing is going to happen before then. And we'll touch on the industrial action that people are taking in the meantime, but nothing is going to happen before then. That there needs to be that discussion first, and then we'll go from them. So that's kind of the response to this one. If a better deal is negotiated, how will this affect us? So essentially, this is again going back to that 2nd of May point. We don't believe that this deal has to either be accepted or rejected by everybody. And being the biggest union, we believe that this is the best that's on offer. And you know, it's going to depend on what that meeting looks like on the 2nd of May, but ultimately on discussion with those that are in the know, we have to make a decision as to whether we accept it or don't accept it first before there would be no negotiations without us. We don't get to cling on to our little bit and then have other people get different things because we're all on agenda for change, and that's what we're changing. We're changing the way agenda for change works. So that's what will be negotiated. So we would all be in those negotiations together, moving it forward or keeping the deal that we've got. So we have to wait for a combined decision from all of the unions as to where we go, regardless of the toys that are thrown out the pram in the meantime. That's kind of where we have to get to first. So, Adam, I will come back to your point, I promise, but we'll just fly through as much as we can to give as many people as possible time to ask questions towards the end. So that brings us quite neatly on to the next point of why are the other unions still taking industrial action. And every single person that I asked this to, and there was a few people scratched their head and went, no idea, that's down to them. Ultimately, it's a really funny position that those unions have taken to have further strikes before we've even decided as a staff group whether we're going to accept or reject it in the meantime. You know, it would be like Unison putting the vote out and trying to get us all, consulting us all on the offer, but then also organising another strike in the meantime. We're not saying whether it's right or wrong. We're not going to bash other unions that are choosing to do that and choosing to not do that. But from our point of view, from Unison, is we have to wait to see. I mean, some unions are committing to more industrial action before the results are even out. There's some really strange behaviour going on. It's not something that Unison would specifically comment on, but I think what was constantly mentioned was that Unison is trying to purvey itself as the adult in the room here. We're going to wait, we're going to follow process properly and procedure as is agreed, because the last thing we want to do is to go into meetings and have the government think that we're a wild card and we're going to start going on strikes left and right. The reason why we're doing everything by the book is because it then means that should things be negotiated again, should we go back to industrial action, the government then knows that we are a union of our word and we will stick to the procedure and plans that are in place. So I'm just going to bring in, let's have a look. Wayne has his hand up. We'll do that, and then we'll while Wayne's making a comment, we'll see where we'll get with Adam. So Wayne, the floor is yours, mate.
Just what you were saying there. You said before that we were removing ourselves from the pay review body. How can we do that before we've heard from what the other unions are saying going forward?
Perfect, thank you for that. So it's a commitment for Unison as a union to not, so we're not physically removing ourselves completely. It's a commitment for Unison to, going forward over the next year, to have a committed sort of plan for removing itself from the peer review body. The peer review body is separate to the industrial action, so it doesn't. What they've recommended is what they're recommended. That's now in the past. We're not asked. We've all been quite frankly insulted by that 3% that they've offered, or the 3.5%, sorry, that they've recommended. And because of that, we're going to remove ourselves from that. But that is kind of a separate issue to what's on offer at the minute. Does that kind of make sense?
I was meaning more how in the future, if we have removed next year, if Unison has removed themselves from the pay review body, but the other unions don't, but we're still on agenda for change, how would that work?
Crikey, now you're getting to really complicated questions that I should definitely be getting paid to answer. But the honest answer is, we're not 100% sure. I think, yeah, there are other unions that have also committed to this. But what it means is that we don't sit at that table and we don't make those recommendations and we don't say that we agree with what the peer review body recommends. It means that the government has to come to us and we then get to decide what we recommend and has to bargain with us to then agree with whatever's decided. So essentially the peer review body would come out and say, we recommend 3%, we recommend 5%. And we would go, well, we're not bothered because we're not involved in that process. You have to come to us and we'll come to an agreement. And the same with the other unions. And it brings, as Jeff mentioned, it brings collective bargaining back into the mix. It's a really strong position. We've seen it in Scotland when Scotland have got that extra £2,000 for paramedics. You know, that's money in their pocket. We know that it works. The implementation and how the next year is going to be with us coming out of it might be a bit more convoluted and a bit more complicated. I don't have all the exact answers. But that it was seen as a real positive thing at conference. So to go to Adam's comment, that is a question on my list about the agenda for change and the nurses' place. I'll come to that. In fact, I'll come to that right now. I promise this isn't planned. I haven't planted anybody in this, but so ultimately, and the flat answer from union is we're opposed to this. We are flat out opposed to this. There were certain things that the government said extra to the nurses because they were more concerned that the nurses were going to walk out of negotiations. But the reason why we're not concerned by it is because that's the sort of thing that has to be agreed by all of the other unions, and there isn't the appetite for that. And also the argument from the other unions is the arguments or the friction that this is going to cause within the workplace is never ever going to be worth the nurses getting themselves an extra whatever it would be a month. And it also weakens everybody's position if the nurses are fighting for their own salary and we're then going to fight for our own salary, and you know, that sort of marketplace or that sort of negotiation where everybody is talking about their own salary weakens everybody's position. So I can tell you now that Unison are opposed to that. And the reason why it was included is because we don't see it as a massive concern or threat. It's not something that we see as going to be on that's even remotely close to happening, because it would be voted down by the other unions present at those discussions. But yes, Adam, go for it.
So realistically, what is the chance that we can actually block it? If the nurses dig their heels in, and don't forget they represent far more people in the NHS than we do on Agenda for Change. So I think I've spoken to a few other people. People are just, it was allowed on the table in the first place. What the Unison playing out? Sorry for my language, but I mean, it's quite obvious that the RCN is selling us down the river. And given the fact that the way they operate as a union, like they're being quite dictatorial, given the fact that they're not even allowing votes of no confidence, their staff don't even want this. So, their members don't even want this. If all you have to do is look at the Twitter responses from all their members, and they're absolutely getting eaten alive. So realistically, yes or a no, can we block this?
I would love to be able to give you the definite, but from speaking to the likes of the press team and others today, they're fairly confident that yes, because of the amount of other unions that sit around the table that will be involved in that discussion. Because you've got to remember, there are a lot of professions, physiotherapists, all other manners of allied health professions, Unison, GMB, Unite, would all be involved in that as a discussion. It wouldn't just be the nurses going, right, we're off to raw.
I mean, we're not as important as nurses if you listen to the RCN.
Well, I'm not going to, because this is recorded as well, and I would definitely end up with my neck on the line if I said anything. I'm not going to be drawn into comment about the conduct of the RCN. I think, you know, clearly you've hit a very clear point. Your comments are echoed by others. But
just blame it on me. It's fine.
The RCN are doing the best for their members as much as we do the best for ours, and I think that's what's safe to say. That's what a union does. The RCN feels it wants to be able to do this, whether it would have happened or not. The Unison were comfortable that it wouldn't be able to happen. But I'll just double check and see where I'll bring Erica in first.
Thank you.
Cheers.
As the elephant in the room, the nurse in the room.
I knew it would come back to bite us. I knew it would. I take it all back. I promise. No, go on. Sorry, I apologize.
I think, you know, some of us are old enough to remember the days when we had different grades for different staff, and we went through years and years of being downtrodden and separated, divide and conquer. We have, whatever we do, we have to fight that. If the RCN push for a separate pay spine for nursing, that cannot happen. It would be devastating to all of us. I remember the days where you fought for every penny that you earned, but then you were struggling because you could move to a different trust and get different money, or you could move to a different profession and get different money. We need to stay on that single pay spine. That took 12 years of negotiating to get to. We cannot let that work disappear.
Yeah, agreed. And that's very much the sentiment that is echoed in the executive committees here at Unison. You know, you're by no means the only person saying it. You probably won't even be the only person in your own union saying it. But that is something for the RCN to deal with. That is an RCN issue that I think they're very much coming out looking for things to present to their members as wins, you know, and that's just the way they've worked, and that's down to them. But I'll say no more. I'm slowly slipping and I can feel it, and I'll say no more. Mark, go on.
Yeah, just first of all, good evening, Erica. Didn't see you there. And just go back onto the pay review body. If, and you may or may not be answering this, Tom, if GMB and Unite decide to withdraw from the pay review body, and they do that in quick fashion, and then Unison, it's a big unit, it takes its time. If they're able to negotiate a better pay deal for their union members than we currently have within Unison, there is a very real threat. There will be a mass exodus across to GMB, to Unite, if they have negotiated a better deal. Can that happen, or is there some kind of legality where we've all got to go across? So we've all got to pull ourselves out of the review body.
Yeah, so cheers for that. And to be honest, Mark, I really understand your concern with this, and this is, we're all concerned that, especially in certain areas of the trust, there is a lot of competition there for members. Ultimately, deciding their own pay in terms of going forward, if we get rid of the peer review body, it will be done collectively. And this is what I mean about collective bargaining. We would all sit around a table with the other unions so that we would all come out with a recommended percentage. As much as it probably doesn't feel that way right now, most of the time the unions work together jointly very well to get what's best for all of our members all together. So I think ultimately going forward that it wouldn't be individual unions would get individual pay deals. In terms of the pay deal in general, again, that's something that after the 2nd of May, everybody has to come together and come to a collective point on. So we wouldn't have different offers for different people, or certainly that's what Unison feel wouldn't be the case. It would be a joint offer.
So for clarity there, Tom.
Yeah.
Both GMB and Unite wouldn't be allowed to leave the pay review body unless the collective leave the pay review body, because how obsessed GMB in particular are, and if they can see, if you have one sliver of light for a massive member snatch, they will jump all over that. And I do exactly the same.
Again, I think commenting on the conduct of another union is a very difficult one, but I'm going to bring Jeff in and see what we've got to say. I presume in response to that, Jeff, rather than a question.
Yeah, absolutely. The decision and the vote on the motion to come out of the pay review body was unanimous today, and that is now Unison policy. It doesn't matter what the other unions do, and we seem to get hung up on what if the other unions do this. I think the point here is Unison's policy now is to come out of the pay review body. Unison is the largest union in the country, in the health service, in the country, full stop. So no matter what the other unions do, Unison will be saying, and I think Tom alluded to this before, it don't matter what the pay review body said. If you want to talk to us about pay, you're talking to us about pay. And listening to the speech, I can't remember the Scottish guy's name, he's brilliant, but he's been campaigning to pull us out of the pay review body for many, many years. And the atmosphere in that conference centre today was fabulous. Everybody's so determined. Yeah, exactly. So determined. It's now Unison policy. So Unison will take this forward, and it'll end up at some point where we'll be saying to the government, no, sorry, you negotiate with us. We don't care what they've recommended. You negotiate with us, and we are the biggest union.
How long will that take, though? In reality,
it's service policy, Mark, and I can't answer that question. I don't sit at them groups. What I'll say is, this isn't, and I understand why you're saying what you're saying. Of course I do. But what I'll say is the Unison bureaucracy is not going to slow this down. It's now policy. It's been unanimously voted on today at conference, and it's fresh off the press list. Nobody else knows this. You're getting this because we've been sat in this meeting today. So if there's any comeback, Tom's going to get a few eggs thrown at him. But I'm only joking. But I think it's a fantastic move because the PRB, it's made perfectly clear today. We all know it's not independent, and what was clarified today is you've got people who, like ITV and other massive organisations have got representatives that are on that PRB that are appointed by the government, who are given instructions on what can be done. So it's not independent, which is why we want to be out of it, and we're now coming out of it. That is going to happen. In terms of just a quick one on the actual question, in terms of the nurses and coming out of having their own pay spine, it's really important to understand that is nothing whatsoever to do with the pay offer. And what Sarah's told us today is that the RCN have actually said to her, no, we don't want that offer being taken off the table, but we want that to stay on the table. So they're on. I don't think they're 100% confident in their position. If you look at their vote, it was very, very close. They haven't got the mandate at this moment in time to continue industrial action beyond whatever date it is when theirs runs out. And if their pay ballot results, reflect a vote to take industrial action against the future, I don't think they'll get it based upon that. That's only my personal view, but it's really important. They are not. This is nothing whatsoever to do with the pay offer. It's totally separate, and all that's been said is the government have said, yeah, we'll sit down with you and we'll talk about it. There's no guarantees that anything will come out of it. And on top of that, like Tom has explained, the other trade unions are opposed to it. And and one of the things that, I've spoke with Sarah and Christina, I can't remember if it was this morning or yesterday, but the repercussions of that will be massive, absolutely massive, because straight away, if that happened, we'd be saying as an ambulance sector, we're going back onto Section 5 now, because we're not staying on Section 2. And that's only one aspect of it. So please understand, it's not part of the pay offer. That's just something on the sideline that the RCN threw in, and the government said, yeah, we'll sit down with you and we'll talk to you about it. And if you draw a comparator, they've agreed to sit down and talk to us about about pay offers. It don't mean we're going to get a great one. So no, it don't mean anything positive is going to come out of that. And Tom, you're absolutely bang on. And what I'll say is, behind the scenes, we are constantly harping on about Section 2 and Section 5. So I promise you that is still happening. Over to you, Tom. Cheers.
We'll come to it. Tom strikes yet again. He's pinched a question from later on in my presentation, so we'll get there, Tom. Well,
it's been a few years in the making about that Section 2. I guess you'll know I've had several meetings with MPs and whatnot about Section 2. Something I feel very, very strongly about.
Yeah, we'll come to it. Put a pin in it. We'll come to it. I'm going to skip over this question because it's very, very similar to the other question. Just to kind of cover a bit of housekeeping that probably should have done a bit earlier. These are taken as a selection from all of the questions that were asked. We then group them into what type of question is it and come up with sort of a summary of all the questions. So I'm going to skip over this one. Don't worry, we've not got many more than this. So if I recently joined or retired from the trust, how will this affect my ability to claim the lump sum? So this is something that directly affects new starting staff and staff that are retiring. Now, again, this is probably going to cause a little bit of controversy, whether people agree with it or like it or not. I think that's not what's up for discussion. We're asking for questions about this. But essentially what is being said is it's a snapshot. So it's staff who were in the trust on the 23rd of March. Now, I'm just going to double check a few things because I said that with a great deal of confidence, but I definitely wasn't very, very confident about it. But yes, so the eligibility for the lump sum is the 31st of March. Good job, I checked my date. 31st of March, 2023. It's that date. So if you were employed and had the contractual hours you were working on that specific date is the snapshot. So if you leave before then, you're unfortunately not entitled to it. And if you join after then, you're you're not entitled to it. But if you join before then and leave after, you're fine. So for those coming up to retirement, not a problem at all. You will get the lump sum. And for those who have recently joined us, irregardless of working through COVID, you will also get the lump sum. It's a very black and white one, this one. So yeah, that's that one. If there's any questions or anything, feel free to raise your hand, but if not, we'll move on because I'm just aware of time. Perfect. So this was quite an interesting one. How will this pay offer affect my ability to claim universal credit? Unfortunately, it is going to affect those that are on universal credit, other sorts of those sorts of schemes. It's not something that I'm very, very au fait with, and it's certainly something that if individual members to reps or if individual members who see this have specific problems or issues with where this puts their pay packet going forward, whether that's the month of the individual payment, whenever month that ends up being, we don't have a definite date for it yet, or if that where your salary is going forward because of the increase that you've had. Come and speak to somebody and we'll work it through with you. But ultimately, what we believe it's going to put people in a position is that it allows, if those who are working at lower band are concerned about this, it allows them to be in a position where they can potentially drop hours or change the number of hours. I believe, stop me if I get this massively wrong, Jeff, but they change the number of hours with which they work so that they can still meet that threshold, because those universal credit thresholds, that what you've got to meet, aren't changing. So essentially what we can say is that you are, it is, Adam, I completely agree with that, but those that are on it can now work less if they wish to, if they are better off still claiming that. I believe I've got that right, but the boss has got his hand up, so here's me, get me wrist slap. Go on, Jeff, I'll let you come in.
Stop calling me the boss. No, it's something that Tom and I touched on earlier, and it was an interesting question. And it's unfortunately, it's not something that we have control of. The rules are the rules with the universal credit. And it's, you know, if you think about it, when they imposed that 1,400 quid on us, all of a sudden, you know, a load of people went into the next pension bracket and lost loads of money and are on less money as part of a pay increase. So these anomalies crop up. And the only thing that does come to mind, like Tom just said, is if a member comes to us and said, look, this pay rise is going to affect my universal credit, then we'd have to sit down and look at their individual circumstances, because everybody's different. And the only thing we can think of is reducing the hours. And that isn't an automatic right. It's something we'd have to sit down and work with the employer with, because it's something that's got to be agreed. But people have a right legally to, you know, have flexible work and things like that. So that's the initial response from us, really. In terms of that. So yeah, you bang on, Tom. Absolutely bang on.
Perfect. Cheers, Jeff. So then that kind of brings us through most of the questions. There's two more that both answers are very, very similar. Now, there was a couple of questions asked, and it's a really, really good point. It's not necessarily specifically linked to this, but I'm going to include it because I think it's very, very important. Can we look to change the retirement age next? And can we discuss other terms and conditions of new and current staff? The reason why I've included both of these at the very, very end is because ultimately we feel like now, because of this, there's a real appetite for making further change within the union. Sitting in conference over the past couple of days, you can see now that people feel like, because we've managed to tackle this, we can then tackle everything else. And whether you're satisfied with the results, you can't argue with the implementation, and you can't argue that, especially, I mean, they were singing all of our praises. And I think as a branch, we have to say a massive, massive thank you to every single person that turned up at a picket line, whether it was for a 20-minute break or 200 hours across however long it felt like. You know, we have to say a massive, massive thank you to those people. And what this means is, in response to both of these questions, both the retirement age and terms and conditions for new and current staff, it puts all of that on the table. Callum, just to quickly jump in there, we have this recorded, so the recording will be available. We'll be posting it sort of over social media and things like that. You will be able to see it. So, but if you've got any current questions that are new, just feel free to give us a shout. Yeah, so to take it back to that point is essentially what we're saying is now we've shown the government, we've shown our employers that we can mobilise our workforce and get people out on strike if that's what it takes. And we've shown that we can do it, and we've shown that we're willing to do it. So it puts everything else back on the table. I can say that there was certainly talks about retirement age at the ambulance fringe meeting that we had last night. That was very much front and centre, and actually was raised by one of our own reps to challenge the executive committee that was sitting there to really make sure that we are bringing this front and centre. So it is on the table. We know that it's there, and we are going to start making some noise about this now that we know that we can start to change other things. So that's definitely going to be there. And for those, Tom, for the Section 2, for those other newer staff on different contracts and things like that, it essentially puts all of that back on the table. We've shown that we can mobilise members. We've shown that we can be a bit of a force to be reckoned with, which I think it's probably been, we can all agree, it's been a little while since unions have been in that position. And it means that a lot of this is back on the table, and we're willing to work with that. So hopefully that covers a few questions. Mark, go for it.
Yeah, just a while back, I asked. It is regarding pension. Obviously when a lot of members are joined, especially in the 95 scheme, they was told 60 years of age. Okay, thanks a lot. That's you done. Now they want more, but also we got the 7 years protection paid back into our 95 pension. Why couldn't we have negotiated at the time? I know that the 95 members stay in the 95 scheme. The scheme that you joined is the scheme that you finished on. Why couldn't we have done that?
So I'm going to be really honest with you, Mark, and you're probably not going to be overly satisfied with this response. And it's certainly something, if you get in touch, it might be something we can look at and try and get a proper response from you. But the honest answer is I don't have the answer to you. It's taken a long time to get the research done and to speak to the right people to get as many of the answers as possible, specifically for this peer review stuff. I think pensions is something that's kind of on the tip of everybody's tongue at the minute. And it's something that is probably going to change and look very different going forward. But in terms of answering specific questions about pensions and about how various pensions work and what we should have or could have done or will do in the future, really difficult. I
know, because I asked a while back and I got someone from Unison National rang me up and I explained it and he emailed, and that's about 3 years ago. So yeah. I don't think that's why, maybe the appetite for Unison to work for the ambulance service isn't as great as it should be.
No, but I think what we're showing is that, and I think again in this conference we were front and center as ambulance services, leading the charge of the fact that we've had these strikes, and they know that if it had have just been down to hospital trusts, and I hope there's nobody from hospital trusts that ended up watching this at the end, but if it had been just down to them, the strikes wouldn't have been anywhere near as effective. And Sarah said as soon as they saw how many branches had got the industrial action, they were quite sort of distressed. But then when they saw that they were almost exclusively ambulance services, they knew this was going to be our dispute, and we really, really ran with it. So ultimately, it may be something that they've not had an appetite to talk with, but it's something that we, as a branch, specifically your own reps within this branch, put at the very forefront of discussions when we had an open discussion with them last night. So it's certainly something that's going to be touched on forward, but I can't give you exact responses. All right. I'm just going to move it on just so that we've still got time, because I know that we're pretty much at the end. But anyway, Matt, I know Matt's got his hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, just want to say well done, Tom. Great presentation. I know loads of people are going to have loads of questions. We're going to open it up to members. If we can keep the questions specifically to the pay deal and the reason why we're having this meeting today, that'll be perfect. We want to take all your questions forward. All reps are in this meeting as well, and we all know that we can take these meetings to our GM, our area-specific meetings or our national meetings as well. Please put all your questions through to your reps. We want to talk about these at meetings, but if we can keep any questions coming up now, just about the pay deal, just to keep it on track, because obviously it's been an hour already and there's loads in the chat to get through. But yeah, thanks a lot, Tom.
Yeah, and if anybody wants this PR, will not be insulted, and we will bring this to a close because it doesn't look like we've got many other questions. The only other one that was mentioned in the chat was what is being discussed regarding the other reasons we went on strike: staff welfare, delays, hospital, unsustainable demand. These are very much alluding to the last question I answered. These are all very valid things. Unfortunately, it wasn't exactly, the reason we went on strike, it was very much for the pay and the change in pay. But like I said previously, it's shown that we can go out on strike and we can effectively implement industrial action. There's also a lot of learning being done. It was quite nice to sit in meetings today with various different bigwigs at Unison actively making notes and learning from what we've done and how we've implemented this as branches and how certain hospitals have implemented. So I think going forward, we're going to be a much stronger branch because of it. So that then translates to us being much better prepared to deal with things like staff welfare, delays at hospital, unsustainable demand, because it was discussed and discussed and discussed. It's still there. We know it's still there, and we're still going to be raising it. So as much as I don't have a definite answer, I can just say that the appetite's there to continue this action, to continue campaigning, to continue actually. We're getting off our horses. In fact, a lot of us are already off our horses having arguments. So let's keep it going while we're all there. So I think that's pretty much everything. Unless anybody else wants to raise a hand last minute, just 1901. I'll take that any day of the week. So it's okay. Yeah, so I think I'll close it off and I'll bring Jeff in to finally finish it. I think it's just to say a massive thank you for those that have been involved and for those that maybe couldn't attend tonight but have posted questions. We're trying to be as open as we can as a branch, and people should bring those questions forward. You can find people's email address very, very easy. Keep raising those issues, keep prodding us, keep letting us know what the issues are, and we'll keep passing them forward. So there's plenty of hands now. I'm going to bring Jeff in. Jeff.
Yeah. Jeff, you're muted.
No, I was the one that did it. I can't believe that.
He's not going to definitely.
You should have just left me to it. No, Tom, massive thank you. You've been an absolute star. The way you've managed this today has been absolutely brilliant. And what I want to say to everyone who's on this is how we as a branch are going to be going forward. We've never done this before. We've invested in a lot of technology now to enable us to do this. You've got Sam in the background who's got this running on YouTube as well, which, absolutely brilliant. But going forward, this is how we want to interact with you, get your feedback. We are a member-led union. I know, I'll say it again, I know that some are not happy with, what we've ended up with. Unison nationally, even from, the General Secretary, has said, look, we know this isn't brilliant and you do deserve more, but this is genuinely all we're going to get from this band of Tory so-and-sos. But as a branch, it doesn't matter what Unison says or does nationally. We have to be guided by them because they make the rules. But as a branch, we will always take on board your comments, your views, and we will always take them forward. But we've always got your back. But I just want to say, this is a typical example now of how we want to move forward. And I just want to say thanks to Tom and Sam and Matt and everything, because we've got a really good group now. We've got us old farts, don't know how to use the technology as good as these guys. So going forward, I think it is going to be really, really good. So cheers.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Jeff. And I think we'll close it there, unless Tom, I think your hand's down there. So anything else, like you say, by all means, get emails to reps, pass those on to myself, and we'll look to format this again, and hopefully we'll be back in touch with people shortly. But on that note, thank you very much for your time, everybody, and we'll be in touch again shortly. Cheers.